welcome everybody for our June Town Hall. That's crazy that it's already June. We're really excited to have Matt with us today giving his presentation. Um, Matt will be sharing about mastering a strategic workforce. So I don't want to take away all his thunder. I'm going to let him kind of give a brief introduction on how he got to be able to talk about this topic, and we'll get into it. As always, please jump in as we go throughout the presentation with comments and questions. We love group discussion, as you all know, and that could be in the chat if you're not comfortable speaking up, but we love when you turn your mic on and join in the conversation. So Matt, I'm handing it over to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for taking the time out of your Thursday. I think today is Thursday. I've lost all track of what day of the week it is. Yeah, so good to see some familiar faces. I think I've talked to several of you in the past, just off the cuff conversation. So thanks for taking your time out. And my name is Matt Armbruster. I spent probably the last 15, 16, 17 years, I think, in the workforce management world, working for varying companies, healthcare, medical device, like I said, mostly in that workforce space, but really, I have a lot of passion around just this particular area of the contact center. Again, I've spent most of my career there, and appreciate David and Jillian and Maggie and all them inviting me to talk about that today. So I will say this: I'm very informal. I'd much rather make this a more of an intuitive discussion versus Matt sitting here and spewing off for the next 60 minutes or whatever we have left. So please jump in, ask questions. I am fully okay with that. I more fly off the cuff. So with that being said, let's kind of jump into it. So when I think about workforce, there are, Jen, you can go to the next slide if you want to. Sorry, I guess I need to prompt you. There were kind of three things that over my career, and even with the past clients I've worked with, that I think are really important. Culture being one of them, and not just kind of the people forward, but just efficiency and effectiveness rate. How well are you doing things? How well are you designing your processes around the customer, the people? And I really view the customer as being both internal and external. Collaboration is a big part of how I've built my career, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then building customer loyalty and retention. How does workforce play into that? So really kind of the things I think about when I look at culture of efficiency and effectiveness is, one, how well are you optimizing your resources just from a efficiency standpoint, right? How well are you smoothing out the demand curve? How well are you delivering your calls to the customer? And how effective are they? I mean, are you meeting demand? Are you achieving service targets? Are you delivering a good customer experience, not only just for the people internal, right, but to the external customer itself? Really, the things that I've preached over my career is focusing less on the process and more on how does this help our customer? How does this improve the daily lives of our internal staff, right? Because they're the ones that have to come to work, have to do the work every single day. Really spend a lot of time building that relationship between the operations partners and the workforce team. And why do I harp on that so much? Because I saw the damage it did early on in my career when I was just at the analyst level of what happened when operations really ran over the WFM team. It just wasn't good from a delivery standpoint. It caused some rifts between the frontline agents and the WFM team. It caused a lot of angst between the groups. I talk about I talked about some of the experience in that delivery piece. That's really kind of high on my totem pole, and making sure that we're looking at that and looking at it the right way. And I'll talk more about this kind of later in the collaboration and in the last slide. But getting that frontline feedback was always really, really important. Are we building the right schedules? Are we meeting your demand? Are we giving you enough access to time off requirements? Are we getting you enough training and development time, team meetings? Are you getting what you need to be successful? So that talks about, that process piece, removing some of that red tape that's there, and really kind of driving some of that stuff home. I really hope to instill that over the course of my career, and no matter what organization I worked in, or even even now in the consulting space, of really working with them to help deliver that. But again, it's not necessarily all about the process, but how efficiently are we delivering this? How effective are we delivering it? So let me stop there and kind of get some thoughts, questions, comments, insights.
Yeah, Matt, I'll jump in. I think it's a great point because I think the culture, workforce management plays such a big piece in the culture, not just in, to your point, the effectiveness or efficiency and effectiveness. The other piece is around kind of perpetuating the culture of continuous improvement, like you mentioned, with development opportunities, but also that everybody makes a difference. And, workforce has such a good opportunity to really kind of ensure that the development opportunities are happening the way they should be, that the conversations are happening, and also agents have opportunity to kind of get a break and be able to pause in between calls, et cetera. I mean, workforce it's the central hub of all that.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. I mean, I think a lot of what I've seen over my career, that foundation has been there. We just had to refine certain areas. And look, I'm not naive to know that workforce has their goals, right? They have to achieve a service level. They have to achieve an ASA. There's adherence measures that they're being held accountable to, but there's also the other side of the coin, right? The agents have their targets, less about AHT, but there are targets around some of that stuff just from a planning and mechanization of your process piece. I think really what we tried to do there, and I'll talk more about that collaboration piece, but I think is how well are we delivering these process? Does it make it easier for them to request time off? Does it make it easier for them to get their exceptions approved? And a lot of that has to do with, the process behind it, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So there's a lot of education that goes on there. And Adam hit the nail on the head where we did a lot of those roundtables. And early on in my career, when I first got into management, when I would do those, the shocking piece to me it was less about workforce and more about the technology that they had access to in their day-to-day job, which made me happy because he made my job that much easier and less about how do I have to go re-navigate kind of the frontline relationship and that with the operations, and we could focus more on delivering a more quality schedule, more quality of call, delivering it the right way, making sure they were set up for success on their side. Again, a lot of that goes back to how do we cross train? How do we keep them up to speed on the multiple, back in my early days when I was with United Healthcare, it was how do we keep them up trained on multiple planes, all the changes that were happening with some of these larger, more self-insured companies. And then on top of that, the new hire process, we did a lot of things to rebuild there on how we handled their training, how we got them acclimated to taking calls early on in the stage versus waiting till later. And that wasn't all a workforce thing, but that was a relationship that we built with them that, hey, we'll give you these more simple calls you can learn with and deliver them, but obviously afforded them a lot more time off the phone to go back and do their training, their coaching sessions, et cetera. So yeah, this is probably one of the more important aspects of the job, and it's less WFME. I'm going to make up a word here, and more about that process drive, taking that feedback and making sure that you're building processes that make everyone's jobs that much easier. All right. Any thoughts, questions? We're rifling through this pretty quick. So,
Matt, I had one more thought.
Sure.
And I'll promise not to keep doing this, but what I'll throw in there is just that it's really important that the employees understand that each one of them makes a difference and contributes to the success of the company. And that's part of the culture piece of this, and that, workforce can actually help a lot with that message and talk about kind of, when you're in a really large organization, you can tend to feel like a number. It's like they'll just fix it in the mix, but especially in the smaller organizations, it really, every person makes a huge difference and has a big proportional impact to your customer experience. So, it's important in both environments to be able to make sure that they understand that they really do, they are important. They do make a difference, and
Right.
Them being there and being on time and all that is really all contributing to a successful experience.
I completely agree. And I'll just caveat on that one too. I know I struggled. I graduated college. I spent most of my younger years working in a steel business, had no idea what a contact center was, let alone what workforce was, happened to just step into this role. And I'm not gonna lie, it took me a little while to figure out what workforce was and what the nuts and bolts, not just the actual job itself of staring at breaks and lunches and adjusting things and understanding the impact, to your point, Adam, of not just what impact the people have, but what impact, again, what that workforce does and how they deliver the experience. I mean, a 6-minute wait versus a 30-second wait obviously puts the frontline, employee in a much better position for a successful call versus a contentious one. Really understanding about, really, I did a lot of, I call it soul searching, just really trying to understand why moving this break from here to here, why it mattered. Not only just to the person, but to the delivery of the actual experience itself. And maybe to the layperson outside of this environment, maybe doesn't necessarily recognize it, but I think a lot of that that process build, that again, we talk about the efficiency and the effectiveness of aligning schedules, right people, right place, right time. And that was one of the things that I really focused on early on as I was learning what workforce was how to tie that back to the experience of both the internal employee and that customer. So that's a great point.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Michael here. There's something called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think Casey Kostecka actually talked about in his book. And, it's survival and security and love and self-esteem and self-actualization. I don't think there's survival in a contact center is workforce management. I don't think there's literally anything more important that you have to have a core competency on in order to be successful in this world than to get this one right. If you don't have this singular tool under your control and something that you do really well, you will fail 100%. You might be able to get away with the rest of the stuff, but you will not get away with not knowing this. I just think it's literally the survival in a contact center. So I don't think there's a more important subject you can talk about. So
selfishly, I couldn't agree more. But yeah, no, I agree, right? I think as I learned, there was so much riding on the importance of what it was that we were delivering. And it took me a minute to really figure out, and I think others, I'm just speaking for myself, I could be wrong, but I think others in the space, and maybe it's taken them a little bit of time, but yeah, that's why, to your point, it was important for me and my team when I finally moved back and took it over, and even imparting that as I went further down the road, was understanding the agent's desires and needs, right? They wanted access to time off. They wanted to have, funny story really quickly. I had got promoted and moved back to Pennsylvania, and I laugh about it. I was mortified at the time because I couldn't believe someone would say this to a VP, but I had a frontline agent actually tell a VP that she just felt like she had to wear Depends to work because she had no time to go to the bathroom. At first I was mortified. I was like, why would you do that? Please tell me you're joking with me. But, I got to walking away from that thinking it's important to remember that, and I've talked about this in other conversations and some of the consulting gigs, is it's really important to humanize the WFM system and processes, and remember that there is someone behind there that actually has to answer the calls, interact with a customer that has needs of their own, childcare issues, taking care of family members, needs time off for vacation, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, selfishly, I will agree that I believe it's one of the more important hubs of the contact center. But I think what's really, in my opinion, made me successful is that I'm able to marry both of those two together and realize that it's not just about the WFM and the systems and the processes and the people that do it, but also making sure that you're connecting both sides of the operation. Because if you've got a disgruntled workforce that's not happy with their schedules, it's not happy with, you're not adjusting their breaks or their lunches to times when they want to go, or there has to be some flexibility there, of course. They're not going to show up for work, and now you're behind the 8 ball, and so is the customer, which is not a good place to be. So no, some really good insights, and I appreciate the conversation.
Matt, I have a question for you in thinking through this. I have a history with workforce management of being able to establish a really successful workforce management team at a prior company. I'm at a new company now, establishing workforce management for a team of close to 500 FTEs. And we are implementing workforce management for the first time and taking people from you kind of work when you work versus now you work when you are scheduled. And, you talked about culture, which is a very important component to me. My workforce team is a little rigid, and they're trying to figure out how to be nice people, but at the same time, tell people, I'm sorry, you can't leave anymore at 3 o'clock to go pick up your child. Just because you used to do that in the past, that doesn't meet our needs any longer. I'm just curious, like, what type of advice, if my workforce management team was on here, what type of advice would you give them to keep that human connection, to not see them as the bad guy? Because that's how they're feeling now. My workforce team is.
It's a very interesting spot to be, and it's not fun. I can 1000% resonate with how they're feeling. That example I just kind of gave you, we had swallowed up a much smaller homegrown operation. So I was the bad guy when I showed up. No one wanted to listen. They didn't understand it. I took the kill them with kindness approach to start. It didn't hurt that one of the analysts that we brought over was actually a supervisor on the contact center floor for the legacy group that we had acquired. So that was a huge, tremendous help. But what I would say is there's a lot of education. I think one of the things that we did really, really well in a past role was really break down what exactly WFM was and what it wasn't. It's not a professional babysitting service. We're not Big Brother. We're not here to micromanage your day, but we are here to make sure that the customer gets the experience they deserve. We are here to make sure that we are using the company's resources as efficiently and effectively as possible. And that means that we got to have the right people in the right place at the right time. To me, if I had to give them advice, it's educate them on what it is and what it isn't. I've spent a lot of time in my career educating them on what it is, what it isn't, why we're here, why we're doing the things that we're doing. And we've delivered presentations around this so they get a visual of what it looks like when you see some of the staffing over-unders that show -20 here, and this is why you feel like you're getting beat up on a daily basis. We showed them the impact of a handful of people just leaving the office when they want to and what it does to the customer experience and that side of it. So, I mean, to me, it really goes around the humanizing it is the educational piece to me, and getting in front of them and showing them that you're an actual person that's doing this and not some IEX system or in Jigsaw or some of that in the background. There's actually a method to our madness, so to speak.
Thanks.
Michelle, I think you had a question.
Yeah, it was more of a comment on that, which is I think all of those points are incredibly valid and valuable. One of the things that I was running a similar size contact center, it's just about 500 people as well. One of the things that we did that helped bridge that gap of that relationship, because when I came in, that was a highly contentious relationship between workforce management and the floor, was actually between supervisors and workforce management. And what we did is we found time for the supervisors to sit with workforce management and vice versa, for workforce management to sit with our supervisors, and not just in a work environment perspective. We also did it in social settings. So we got them to know one another from a personal perspective. And that really helped on the humanization component of it. And it helped them both understand each other's perspective on, well, why is it important to you to leave at 3 o'clock? And here, let me show you the challenge of what happens if I put you leaving at 3 o'clock. Here's what happens to our customer experience when I do that. Here's how I have to kind of manage that within the system. And you can see now all of a sudden my hold time jumps to probably 6 to 10 minutes, which we don't want to have happen. Can we maybe think about how we do that together, think through it together? And we got a lot of collaboration between those two groups, and ultimately came out with something that it wasn't perfect by any means for the folks that were on the floor, but because they had a greater sense of understanding, they were willing to make compromises and really understood when scheduling happened a certain way or another way.
And I love that call out, because I think the education piece, but also that sharing that in the day in a life of what we go through. But I think one of the things, and to your point, Michelle, was we spent time showing, hey, if you leave, this is how many calls your peers have to take now because you decide to leave for the day. Here's the brunt of the work you're going to put on them. Now, instead of them taking 20 or 30 calls, now they're going to take potentially 40. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there's an impact to your teammates. I can tell you sometimes that was actually a good thing because we could see some of the I don't want to call it the in-floor fighting, but it was like, hey, your leaving is going to cost me to do this. And people started to actually acclimate better to, hey, now I fully understand what happens if I have to leave for the day. And it wasn't a punitive or a punishment thing. It was some of that stuff just took care of itself on its own because their peers would start calling them out. And I saw that in the last full-time role I had, where I had several frontline reps. I think I'd been in the role for maybe 2 weeks. They were reaching out to me complaining about, hey, I'm doing all this work and so over here isn't carrying their weight. And it was a tough place for me to be because we were just introducing, Renette, I hope I got your name right, to your position. The role was new. They had some folks that were in the organization that were on the management side of it. They were doing the WFM work. They were doing well, I'll just say it was lack of scheduling. It was more of, they had an Excel spreadsheet that was kind of more of a what's the word I'm looking for? More of a guide than it was an actual in-use document where people weren't following it. So yeah, it was, I think just the education piece, letting them sit with them and understanding is a really good call out.
So, but Matt, aren't we in just a completely new world that we've never been in before because of at-home agents? Isn't the creativity potential now for workforce management to allow all these people to hit their 3 o'clock, because with at-home agents, they can start and stop at different times? Hasn't that just upended and made it like 1,000 times more flexible?
I haven't necessarily seen a whole lot of challenges with it. My biggest challenges were around, well, I want to work cases. I don't want to take phone calls today. It was just getting people on the phones, sitting there watching RTA, watching calls, just holding queue, and people would answer calls when they wanted to. I think there was more, the difficulty for us was getting people on the phones, having them understand that, Ronette, to your point, this was a brand new thing where workforce is coming in, and we spent some time educating more on the management side and less on the rep side, but that was somewhat by design because we had to get leadership on the same page as us in order to be supportive. There was some flexibility. There were things we put in place, I think, and that just goes back to kind of what I've really imparted on my teams in the past. Be flexible. This may sound bad. I don't want to hear the word no. There's always a solution to any type of situation, but I think it's that educational piece, kind of what Michelle was talking about, and having them understand what role workforce plays in that. And yes, there is some level, I think, of increased flexibility. People have this, but we designed shifts to help support that. We did flex shifts. We did 4x10s. We did, the standard 8x5s. We really worked around some of those areas. We offered part-time type roles so we could fill some of those gaps to give them what they needed. I will say I haven't really necessarily experienced what you're talking about, but I think there's ways to combat that just around the cultural aspect of it and making sure that people understand on both sides of the fence what role that this plays in that type of process.
Yeah, I was actually I really liked the comment that Michelle made, but the other piece to that is this is for Renette. One of the things we did at MCI is we created, do you guys remember the old TV series ER?
And watched it, but I remember it.
Yeah. Well, what we did, I created was a way for all employees, because I'm looking at Marilyn Roush's point here about new hires and especially new managers, but creating a way for them to walk a mile in workforce management shoes. And so what I did is I used the TV show ER, and it was kind of like a scenario-based thing. So you're the chief of staff for the emergency room, and now you have a whole bunch of, maybe there was a big earthquake or something. You have a bunch of casualties coming into your ER, but you've got, Dr. Michael, whoever is asking for the rest of the afternoon off. What do you do? right? And it was just a lot of scenarios that workforce management deals with every day in real-time management as well as scheduling. And it put them in the decision-making seat. So they got to understand and appreciate what workforce management has to go through in order to make those decisions. And it helped them understand kind of the impact each person really has. So that worked really well for us and became part of our new hire training program.
That's awesome. Actually, Joni, if you want to go to the next slide, I think that's a perfect segue into the second slide. We probably touched on this already, because I tend to get a little scatterbrained sometimes and jump through a whole bunch of thoughts in one run-on sentence. But I tried to take the approach, and Adam, I'm going to take your lead on this one. One of the TV shows I watched for a while, I think it was called, was it New Amsterdam? I think is what it was called. And the lead doctor, his thing was, how can we help? I mean, and really that's when I talk about this slide and the collaboration piece I asked my team to take the approach of how can we help? How can we help make your lives that much better? Because I knew the return on that was going to be tenfold. And please don't take that as it was a very selfish thing on my part, because I knew it wasn't like we owe you one thing. It was, I knew if they were happy and understood and we showed we were willing to work with them and how we could help them make their lives better, that was going to return the favor. If I had to go back to someone and say, hey, I've got so-and-so over here that needs a day off. There's no time left. We really can't afford it. Are you willing to give up your day off? I will give you any day you want later, right? Or the team will. I shouldn't say I so much. The team will work with you on the day off down the road. Is it something that's critical for you to have this? And I found 9 chances out of 10, people were willing to work with us. They were willing to support their peers, and they were willing to go out of their way to help someone else do the things that they needed. And it wasn't this I owe you one mentality. It was just the culture that we tried to reshape, and that collaboration that we really tried to work towards really benefited all sides of the fence, or both sides of the fence, however you want to phrase it, right? This is probably one of the things that I feel is most crucial and important in a WFMer's day in the life, is really building those relationships and those bonds with the operations partners. We go in and do, so Adam, to your point, I just saw it pop up. We go do a new hire presentation for those that started in and kind of explain who we were. Cause it was just as important for them to learn who their direct managers were going to be, and the site director and all that. But it was just as imperative and important that they knew that all the people sitting in this fishbowl over here, they were people too. And they weren't just sitting there watching the weather and, well, why did they have the weather on? Why were they doing the things they were doing? It really, to the second line there, really kind of created a different level of focus. It really got everyone on the same page as to what role WFM was and how we were operating on a day-to-day basis. And I threw the last one in there because I think I've learned a lot about this over the years. I've gotten a number of direct line phone calls, or people stopped by my desk when I was in a brick and mortar location, and there's a plethora of knowledge out there you can learn from the front line. And I think leveraging and getting feedback from WFM, maybe there's times that people aren't willing to share things with their direct supervisor. Now, I wouldn't go out, and my teams wouldn't do this either, go out and blab to the supervisor, so-and-so came and told me this, because there was a level of confidence that's there. But if there's some level of, hey, I don't mind you sharing this, I just don't have the confidence to share this with my direct line leader, which is another whole nother problem and issue that we need to work towards. But I think it's important to leverage the WFM team, because they do know more than I think most people think. It's almost like a little therapy box over there sometimes. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have stopped by my desk or even into our little locked fishbowl room to vent about Sally Smith or John Doe over here. And I mean, there's a lot to be learned on that side. And again, it's not a he said, she said. It's not meant to be contentious, but there's a lot you can learn about an operation, and we get creative in how we can help fix that and what role we can play in mending those relationships on that side. So let me pause here. I know we talked a lot about this collaboration piece a lot already. Are there any thoughts, questions?
Matt, I'm curious from your perspective, or anyone really, if anyone's ever had any success doing any type of variable or sliding pay shifts, for shifts that are harder to fill and all that you offer a, extra stipend bonus for filling those shifts. Because ultimately, at some point, anyone's going to say, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to work that shift that no one else wants if it's worth enough to me. So has anyone had any success with that?
Hey, Matt, this is Michael. Do you mind if I throw something out there on that?
Absolutely, yeah, by all means.
Awesome. Was that David that asked the question?
Yes.
It was.
Hey, David. Mike Hildebrand. I work with Daniel Roth at Dispatch Health. When I previous coming to Dispatch Health, I worked in a sales outbound. It was an outbound sales. They sold insurance, and it was a lot of incentive to get your own. You know, you had to answer a certain amount of calls, but it was a lot of outbound and things like that. So what we did is we did something very similar to what you're saying. We gave everybody a core shift. We told people that you were a full-time employee, which meant you had to work between X number of hours and 40 hours. And we knew that our peak time was Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So everybody in this group, we scheduled Monday through Friday, 10 to 2, and then they could pick up the hours wherever else they wanted. We would post those hours 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks out, and they would sign up for them. And it gave them a lot of incentive to really understand, hey, I'm in control of my shift. And, you know, they were there for the core times. They would work the hours that they needed. The reason I bring it up is I found a lot of success in this, especially in that arena of the inbound and outbound sales, because they self-actualized, you know what, if I work these hours, I'm making more money. And so the onus became on them to say, it behooves me to be kind of where workforce management wants us to be, because I'm getting that extra income based on, it was a very successful program. They actually kept it going after I left the company, and I've heard that it's still running pretty successfully.
Yeah, I'll just caveat to that one, David. We actually did, I'll call them flex shifts. So we would build our entire shift bid around the core hours, taking into account any special shifts that were asked for, like split shifts, or hey, I've got school going, I need this shift. Had to get approved by operations in the leadership team, but we actually we would build a bid, and then we would say, hey, we're going to offer X amount of flex shifts per group. So group A, B, C, D, and E. Maybe you had 2 or 3, maybe you had 4, maybe you had 5, maybe there was just 1. But we would incentivize them that, hey, this is the process. I go back to the first slide. Here's the process around what this means. I need you to fully understand that this means that you're going to be at the mercy of our scheduling. And it wasn't meant to be as a punishment, but it was, hey, you're going to get X amount of dollars per shift. It didn't matter what you worked, but you had flexibility built in where you could work 11 to 8 Monday, Tuesday, and then 8 to 5 Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, depending on what the needs were of that coming week. Now it was 1000%. We planned it in advance, and it wasn't I'm going to come to you at 7:58. 2 minutes before you leave, you need to be here at 8 tomorrow because we need to move your shift. We did not do that. There were certain cases that there were, but to me, that went back to process. We fully defined what that looked like, and how we were going to handle it. And we stuck to that side. So we did have some success with that one, just especially in some of the smaller groups where we only had 8, 9, 10 agents, where we had either some significant level of call outs, which we had to mitigate further. We would use that one as a tactic to kind of move that forward.
Yeah. So we did something, again, probably a little bit different and nuanced compared to the type of call volume. But when we were at HomeServe, we did the same thing at Wayfair. When we had call volume, spiky call volume that we could anticipate. The problem with HomeServe is it's home warranty. So you would have like an emergency event in a certain area of the country, and all of a sudden your volume would go crazy, and you couldn't really anticipate that. But when we had moments like that, we had everybody actually on text. We didn't have super sophisticated mechanisms for communicating with our teams. And this was when everybody was home with COVID. So we used our text messaging system to be able to reach out to people and let them know, hey, there are additional hours that are available, whether it's weekends or overnights. And that was how we would enable people to do bidding on the additional hours. Not sophisticated. And we did put bonuses associated with that. So we had it very clear that, certain time periods had an X over on the flat rate for those times. And then we also did just like flat out, like, hey, if you sign up for the shift, we'll give you a flat $50, and had a lot of success with that. What we also ended up doing at the end, which actually I was surprised at how successful it was instead of giving money, we gave days off. And you guys may have come across that, but that was a hit. And that was the kind of stuff that they absolutely loved, was being able to get the additional day off. We had to manage it. There was complexity on the back end in managing that, but really popular.
Love those ideas. That's awesome.
I was just gonna say, I love that idea with the day off. We had success with that too. People really value their time more than anything else, it seems like. One thing I would just add to this, going back to David's question, is and I'm curious what the group here has done. You know, we consistently did an overnight shift differential to kind of motivate people to go on the shift and then stay on the shift. So that was part of it. And I really like, I think it was Mike's idea around, you know, the kind of the value that they're going to get in their paycheck, so to speak, just from having more jobs to do or more opportunities to make more money with a heavier call volume. The one kind of unique idea that we had was kind of fun, was going back to Michelle's point about weather. We had a SWAT team that we tried one time, and that was actually kind of fun, and it worked out pretty well. But it was Severe Weather Action Team was our SWAT team. And what we did is we took volunteers that wanted to be part of it, so that when we did have a weather event or something like that, these guys would be our first responders, so to speak, to jump on the, you know, come back and jump on the phone, or, you know, especially in today's remote world, it'd be a lot easier. But that way they got paid a little shift differential to be part of that. And, you know, a little bonus when they jumped on, but also kind of helped us, you know, with some of our peaks.
I got another question for you, Matt, and the group on this. Has anyone had any success with when you do shift bids and all that, of prioritizing people based on their attendance and maybe their CSAT ratings and stuff like that, where they get to bid first and you know, have an opportunity to kind of get the bids in first for shifts versus, you know, the people that maybe don't have the best attendance out there? Any success with those programs for some of y'all?
So I'll defer to the group first, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah, we did that performance-based on shift bids, and it worked really well. It wasn't just the attendance, though. It was
okay.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Same thing that, you know, like I always caution folks, having 6 or 7 metrics as part of your performance evaluation is just going to become moot. But I think there's a place for attendance in there as part of the key metric to help rank your agent, for lack of a better term. And I think it's a huge success.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly all the criteria we used originally when we first launched the shift bidding process. I think there were four or five criteria. I think attendance was definitely one of them. Quality was another. Adherence, I believe, was a measurement I think we used. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember. It was pretty far back. I think, and seniority or tenure was one of those, and that was probably more heavily weighted when we first started. But I think as we move forward, we realized that as a group, that just because you've been here longer than someone doesn't necessarily mean that your quality or your call control or your ability to service the customer as needed was any better than someone who's been here 6 months. You know, there was definitely a little bit heavier weight on that one. But I think we moved more towards that performance-based bid. It was more around, you know, showing up for work was obviously a key component of that. I think to me, that still was one of those, you're being a good teammate, you're here, you should be rewarded for that, because that's the first step, is just showing up for work. You know, quality is another one. I think it was pretty heavily weighted, but I think we left tenure or seniority more probably the 10 or 15% weight bucket. But the expectation we set with new hires is that you're not going to bid in the process. You had to be here for at least, I think it was like 6 months or so, or before you could participate. And we would layer them in. They had an expectation they would work a later shift, typically, depending on when they came on board. But I've always thought that the performance-based one was more suited or aligned versus, you know, one that was more heavily weighted on your years of service, or in some cases months of service.
Back on the variable pay scales for shifts and all that, you know, it reminds me of my days at Disney with our revenue management team. You know, depending on how booked a hotel was, you're going to pay a different rate when you call today versus tomorrow. So, as shifts fill up and things like that, or you get shifts that aren't filling up, does anyone have a variable system that would automatically make those shifts more worthwhile to an employee, or is it all fairly manual and process for everyone?
Manual for us.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say I probably lean more towards the manual side of that one.
I can tell you, this is Dustin from Medica. I can tell you for probably close to 10 years, we have always offered $1 an hour shift differential for anyone who works a shift after 6 p.m. And even though it doesn't sound like a lot, we've definitely had people base their shift bids on that shift differential. That's why we've had it around for so long. I do think it's probably been a decade. We've been pretty successful with filling those later shifts, the less desirable shifts typically. Some of that is based on that differential. And that was a matter of us, getting that buy-in from HR. But once it was approved through HR payroll, then it just goes out in the regular shift bids. Hey, FYI, if you bid for a shift after 6 p.m., if you win that, you got $1 an hour shift differential. And that's just kind of a permanent fixture for us.
Yeah, I think, David, to your point, this is a little bit off subject, but I think when we looked at our ability to offer VTO or VTU, or some places call it differently, I think we would really work hard to support those that worked that 11 to 8 shift. Because how many times do you get an opportunity to leave early when you're a closer? It's very rare, right? So we would make sure as an incentive for them too, because the biggest complaint about that one is I never get a chance to take advantage of any of this early out or leave early, that type of stuff, because they were kind of stuck, right? So we offered it where we would give them priority, and we make it clear to operations we're going to look at them first as a priority to either come in later a couple of hours or leave the office for a couple of hours, but we still were able to find a way to incentivize them to still have interest in those shifts. I think it was just the evolution of how we instilled different processes. I know it's not exactly 1,000% aligned to your question, but I think there were things that we did that weren't necessarily dollar incentivized, where we would give them priority or we would consider them first in some of those areas where they don't get a lot of advantageousness of, I'm gonna make up a word again, of that side of the coin, because they had to be there close. We had to have people on the front end and the back end. And most of the people that did were your 8, 9, and probably 10 o'clock start times that got to leave a little bit earlier. So that was one way I think our team did a good job of supporting those in that shift. And I forget who made the comment. I think I don't know if we actually offered. We did the flex shift rate where it was a couple dollars extra an hour for the entire shift. I think we did offer some level of compensation for the 6 to 8. I don't remember that far back, but I think there's just some things you can do as a group, and it's not just a WFM silo thing. It's a collective operational agreement that, hey, we're going to help out by doing X, Y, and Z. And I think that's how we got some level of incentive around some of those shifts. I want to go back really quickly to the shift bid conversation around how we handled some of that. One of the things, I got a lot of complaints where this isn't the shift I want. This isn't what I thought I was going to get. And it's a tough sell, right? It kind of goes back to the first slide of, we're building this based upon where we know the demand curve is. And unfortunately, you got a crappy shift. I empathize with you, but we always did a good job of turning that negative into a positive. The comment was always, okay, you've got 3 months to perform, get your quality up, come to work on time, whatever those metrics were, right? Whether it was come to work more consistently, follow your schedule better, be here on time, be a good teammate. You have 3 months to change that. Maybe it doesn't always align with the next bid, but you're going to get closer and closer to that shift you want. And we always, I just remember those conversations I used to have directly with the frontline people. So that's just one of those, I wanted to bring that up as a conversation, how to spin that negative into a positive, because it puts the onus back on them to say, oh, you know what, I have to perform. It wasn't workforce saying, hey, you're going to get this crappy shift because we don't like you. I know that stigma exists and existed. But it got really, the reception was really, really good. I think it put them back and it put them in a spot where it's like, hey, I do have accountability. I do have, I can't control tenure, but I can control the other things that within this metric to give me that increased chance of getting a better shift.
Got another question for you, Matt. So how active are everyone's workforce management teams in the day-to-day operation? I mean, the minute-by-minute operation, because I've got some that are, very active to where they're watching and they're the ones that will call in and say, hey, pull people off break, or got hit with a spike, or, can we delay someone's lunch or whatever, versus some call centers, they're mainly the schedulers. So I'm just curious where people fall in that, your role as workforce management at your call centers.
I'll throw my 2 cents in, as you guys can always count on. Real-time real-time management is critical to successful operation of the workforce, and and managing a center. And so for a lot of good reasons, you can plan a lot, but there's this whole real-time situation that happens, like Michelle mentioned, about weather events or all sorts of different things that can throw a monkey in your wrench, and or whatever that is. And you have to be able to respond and have somebody watch that and manage that.
Yeah, I've seen both ends of the spectrum. We've always been very hands-on, but the roles that I've worked in have always been scheduling and RTA all lumped into one. So we had certain hours of the day where you would work RTA, that was your focus, for 2-3 hours at a time, and then you come back and do your regular work during those other hours while your teammates were either holding their team meetings or some of that stuff. But I mean, the environment that we were in, we had 1,000 agents that we were responsible for, across multiple sites, time zones, all that stuff, and even some offshore. Later on in that my management tenure there, but it was critical. We wouldn't be at like 30 seconds or a minute. It was probably a couple of minutes. We gave them some leeway or some grace period. It was like 2 or 3 minutes. If we didn't see them, we had a group chat that was set up with all the supervisors. Hey, Sally Smith's late from break, whatever that was, for 3, 4, 5 minutes. We have calls in queue. But again, I go back to the very first slide, and even this one, it's that relationship that we built, and it wasn't that way at first. It took a lot of work between myself and operations, my team and operations, to rebuild some of those relationships where they were responsive and they were Johnny on the spot. And because before, it was, we'd say something and no one would answer, and my team would have to get up from their desk and walk around the call center floor and start tapping people on the shoulder. And I'm sure most of you know how that goes. It's not a good interaction most of the times, and not because they handled it inappropriately. It's that big brother mentality or stigma that kind of goes with it. So, yeah, I mean, I would just say, kind of wrap that one up. We were heavily involved in longer calls, people coming back from late to break or lunch, or even, hey, so-and-so hasn't been here for 10 minutes. Where are they? Are they a no call, no show? Did they call in? We just missed it. That type of stuff. So we were heavily on top of those type of things, but just because of the nature of our ASA and service levels that were there. Hopefully that's helpful.
One more question related to that, real-time adherence. Obviously, somebody has to be in charge of it and own it during a particular shift or throughout a day. And it could be on the ops side with a supervisor, or it could be on the WFM side. My question, I'm curious if anyone has tried it where you set it up as a joint responsibility between someone from each group and say, okay, during this shift, this supervisor, somebody on the WFM team, you jointly own responsibility for this, for the day, for the shift, whatever, and you have to both watch it. You both have to communicate and work together to achieve the common goal.
Totally. Yeah, I think it is both people's, or roles, responsibility. You need to have somebody dedicated to it, though, in my opinion, because of the fact that supervisors get busy with one-on-ones and not watching the queues and doing their real responsibilities. So they're not really watching as closely as a dedicated real-time analyst would. And the other piece that I would just mention on this is that it also is a great way to create efficiency, because not just to handle peaks and volumes, but when you start when you're getting less call volume than you had maybe forecasted. This is a great opportunity to go back to what Michelle said about giving people an opportunity to get the afternoon off, or to, take some unpaid time, for instance, so that they can, go and enjoy the afternoon with their daughter or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When it's not high volume, and that creates more efficiency for your overall operation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Hey
a great
guys,
point.
I hate to interrupt, but this town hall has been exhilarating so far. I think our conversations are too good. We just want to keep going. But we do only have a few minutes left. And I know we didn't get through all of Matt's slides. So just with our last few minutes, I want to give Matt a chance to kind of share his closing thoughts. And then I have a quick question for the group that I'll be sharing in the chat after Matt gives his closing thoughts. If everyone can hang out for just an extra minute or two, that would be great.
But yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of passion around this particular topic. I mean, it's obviously near and dear to my heart. I spent the majority of my career building it, and it's why after my last layoff, I decided that I was going to start my own venture and go out into the world and play the role of consultant. I really, why I built this the way I did, because I see a lot of opportunity out there just in the WFM space. The last couple of roles, we didn't have a WFM, or it was non-existent, or supervisors were managing it. And I could see the gaps in the process, the gaps in the understanding. And that's really why I kind of went out on my own, and why I have so much a passion for this particular subject. So I thank you all for enduring me for the last 45, 50 minutes. Hopefully it was informative and enjoyable. Certainly open to having some future conversations if you're up for it. So, and Jillian, thank you, and David and the CCNG team for having me.
Thank you, Matt, so much for
thanks,
coming.
Matt.
Yeah, great.
Yes, thank you, Matt, for coming and sharing today. I think it was a really wonderful conversation. And working to put together some new topics to bring to regional events. And oh no, my chat went away. And I'm going to throw just 3 questions in the chat. If people before they log off will be able to just share 1 or 2 words answering each of those questions in the chat, that would be preferred, so I could save it and share it with our team. That would be really helpful for us as we bring more town hall and regional events to you all. So I'm going to send those now. And of course, feel free to hang out if you want and bug Matt a little more for as long as he has the time for us right now. But yeah, I just threw those questions out there. We're using them to help brainstorm new topics for regional events. So input from members is really important.